First things first, we have to say happy Mother's Day to anyone who's tuning in. And if you're tuning in at some point later down the road, well, if you are a mom, I hope you had a great one. I am Clarissa Constantine. I'm founder of the Parent Tween Connection, and I am super excited to have Lorraine Connell with us here today. So, Lorraine, first of all, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I know you're going to go into it, but I'm really, really excited that you are offering this opportunity for people to share, but also this opportunity to raise funds for teens who need these supports, because it's just so powerful and impressive. I'm so excited you're doing it.
Absolutely. So, if you're listening after the fact, Lorraine is actually our kickoff speaker for a month-long, actually like 5-week long event called Empowerthon. It is our first fundraiser for the Parent Tween Foundation. Now, Parent Tween Connection, we've got a community for families, we've got a community for professionals, and we work to introduce the two to each other. But it didn't feel right to be like, but wait, how do we actually help families pay for the services that, for example, someone like Lorraine can offer? Because we could go on and on and on about the whole, cost of living and inflation and all that crap that we're dealing with. But the fact of the matter is that there inevitably is a financial gap between families and the help that they need. So for those of you listening in, this is a fundraiser. I'm going to ask you to keep your ears open as we go through this conversation with Lorraine, as you start to get some really good nuggets. And FYI, our conversation is going to be like maybe 20, 25 minutes or so. As you get nuggets, be like, oh, hey, there's something that I didn't know, or there's something that I learned. Because we are going to ask you at the end, if you've gotten some nuggets like that, to say thank you to Lorraine for her time by making a donation through her link to the Parent Tween Foundation. So, Lorraine, thank you so much for doing what you do, but also for helping us do what we do.
Yeah, likewise. I'm really grateful for this opportunity, and I'm really hopeful that I provide all of you out there with lots of nuggets that you feel there's a lot of value, and are willing to open your pocketbooks and help kids, because the work that I do, I really do want to be available to every kid everywhere, because it shouldn't, and this is part of what we might go into today, but it shouldn't just be for kids who are privileged. We want to make sure that every kid everywhere has access to these wonderful services that people are out here providing.
Absolutely. All right. So Lorraine is the founder of Peers Not Fears. She is mad crazy about helping kids develop leadership skills. She has a background in education. She has a background supporting kids. And she recognized that leadership was a piece that was happening for some kids, but not for a majority of kids. So that's why she founded Peers Not Fears. So do you want to add a little bit to that? And then we're going to talk comfort zones, panic zones, and challenge zones.
Yeah, the only thing that I want to share is that in my time in education, I saw so many kids with the potential to be leaders feel like they couldn't do it, or they weren't eligible to do it, or they weren't good enough to do it. And so that's my mission. I want to change that culture out there.
I love it. All right, so let's jump in. Comfort zones, panic zones, challenge zones. What the heck are they? How do they fit in? How do we get, like, what makes challenge zones so awesome? And all that jazz. We'll see where we go.
Yeah. So the first thing that I want to acknowledge is I feel like the term comfort zone is used an awful lot. I see it on social media. I've seen it on TV and ads, and it's everybody is telling us to step outside our comfort zone. And that term is making the assumption that we know what our comfort zone is. How do we get our comfort zone? What is outside of our comfort zone, and what does that mean? And so if you would pull up my image for me so that we can talk about this, thank you, is that our comfort zone is a place where we feel really safe. And that is why you often hear people saying, step outside your comfort zone, challenge yourself. But the challenge is if you go too far out of your comfort zone, you hit your panic zone. And if you hit your panic zone, then you're like, why would I step outside of my comfort zone? So the idea is that there's a space in between, and you can see that spaces in between your comfort zone and your panic zone is called your challenge zone. And so when you are in your comfort zone, things are really easy. You feel really safe and secure and comfortable, and that's great, except you're not learning.
And you're
And
not
when
growing.
you're not being challenged, you're not
Mhm.
learning, you're not growing, okay?
Mhm.
But the same thing is true when you're in your panic zone. You are in fight or flight, you are in protect myself at all costs, and
Mhm.
your body has no capacity for anything besides protect, protect, protect.
Mhm.
So, if those two zones are so completely opposite, but they do the same thing where they prevent you from learning, then you want to be somewhere in the middle. And that is your challenge zone. So it's uncomfortable. That's the
Mhm.
thing that we don't understand is that when you step out of your comfort zone, it does feel uncomfortable. And
Mhm.
sometimes discomfort is okay. Too much or anxiety producing is your panic zone. So come back in closer to your challenge zone.
Right. Okay, so now that we kind of know what they are,
Yes.
I think there's plenty of adults who don't even necessarily realize that, right? And where it's like, wow, if I have to go from 0 to 180, I'm forgetting that there's innumerable degrees, well, 180 degrees, 179.9, right? Degrees
Right.
in between. And so, can you give us some examples of like, how do we, somebody who's in a comfort zone, maybe it's a parent who's navigating something challenging with their kiddo, and, they're like, I don't know, they think that the 180 goes 100% the other direction, but like, what could an in between be?
Right. And I think, I'd like to give the example really starting with my own children or students that I see in my classroom, right? So I
Mhm.
taught chemistry, and most of us, as soon as we hear chemistry, it puts on us into that panic zone, that anxiety
Absolutely.
producing, right? So
Mhm.
chemistry, the word chemistry brings up these feelings from within. And now
Mhm.
my kids walking into a chemistry class, I am in panic because I don't know chemistry and I am feeling like there's no way I'm going to be able to help them. So, how do I support my kid? How do I keep myself out of my panic zone? Is we come to some sort of agreement of how do we, when our kids struggle in a subject that is hard for us, how do
Mhm.
we support them? So,
Mhm.
rather than regurgitating those anxieties or those fears of our own, what kind of tools can we provide our kids? We can say, "Did you talk to your teacher about that struggle?" "I don't wanna go
Mhm.
to my teacher." "Okay. Did you look around the classroom? Did you see anybody else who seemed to be, like, pen and paper, just going right at it?" "Yeah, yeah." Are any of them somebody that you feel like you could talk to?"
Mhm. Mhm.
"Maybe, maybe not." "Okay, well, can you send your teacher an email?" Like, maybe you don't wanna approach your teacher in class because you're afraid that somebody's gonna say something to you. Can you send your teacher an email? As a parent, I don't feel panicked when I'm helping my kid write an email. If I have to sit down and teach them that chemistry, I'm gonna feel panicked, but I know what tools that I can support them with so that I'm
Mhm.
not creating that panic for them and I'm not creating the panic for myself.
Right. Okay. So just looking at it, that kind of falls into our foundations of connection that I know you and I have talked about of explore, and model exploration for them and encourage them to explore of what other ways, how else could we approach this? What are some other ideas that we can jump into? All right. So now that we know what they are and we know we've got an example of a way that we can explore to find different options, where do we go next?
Well, I just wanna say that something that is comfortable for me may be something that's panicky for you or vice versa.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I really love to use the example of spiders because for me, spiders are like I don't really think twice about them. They're no big deal. But for me, a dog puts me into my panic zone, which is really
Uh,
kind of something that you might not expect. Now,
mhm.
those of you who are listening, I'd love for you to sort of like mentally think about where would you put yourself for a spider? And let's say a spider is something that you would put in your panic zone because I loved my husband to death, but like spiders are such a panic button for him. So, what I like to talk about is it's really comfortable for me. It's really
Mhm.
panicky for him.
Mhm.
So, I come and I help him, but I have to also like so I'm taking care of the spider, but then I have to sort of like assuage his fears, which pulls me a little bit out of my comfort zone and moves me into my challenge zone. And as I'm taking care of the spider and talking kind of like here, it's tiny, it's not going to get you. It's calming him down and it's moving him closer into his challenge zone.
Mhm.
So, what I like to talk about is something that is comfortable for me. It's not
Mhm.
necessarily a panic for, or it's not necessarily comfortable for somebody else.
Right.
And I'm not everything is going to be in my comfort zone and not everything is going to be in my panic zone.
Mhm.
So knowing that people move in
Mhm.
these circles all the time in different situations and different people are in different places at the same time.
Right. Well, and I think even if you've got, obviously we're talking about this in parent tween connection where we're talking about engaging with teens and tweens. My thought as you're talking about this is that it's really easy for us to look at the situation and go, what are you afraid of? It's a spider. Like it's teeny tiny. It's the size of your pinky fingernail. It's not going to hurt you, right? Like some of the things that you were saying with your husband. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't, right? Because sometimes they're like, it's still terrifying, mom. Like it could do all these things from whatever their fantastic imagination has created. And so I like how you're saying that, no, okay, let's look at some other ways that we could manage this and help them, instead of just being like, you're crazy for being afraid of the spider. That doesn't help anything. If anything, that could make it worse, especially with kids whose frontal lobes aren't developed yet.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all about acknowledging where they're coming from
Right.
and I think that kinda leads into why we're so afraid or or why we think that we can't step outside of our comfort zone.
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the things like you talked about, okay, here's what they are. What are some of the signs that we recognize when we're in comfort zone versus challenge zone versus panic zone?
Yeah, so I really like to point this out because I think we can all know and recognize this sign is when we find ourselves in a challenging situation, you'll often see our teens go to their phones. And I know that I fight with my teen all the time about his phone and I cut back his time, but really what I should be asking is what is it that's challenging him right now? And what is it that I can do to like just make him aware that it's okay to feel that discomfort. It's okay to feel
Mhm.
challenged. But also acknowledging that it may be outside of his challenge zone and it may be pushing him into his panic zone. And that phone, that comforting device will allow them to navigate those fears and those anxieties. But
Mhm.
I think it's really part of that conversation rather than taking their phone away or telling them that their time limit is up or whatever. Have a conversation.
Mhm.
Why did you default to your phone last night, when
Mhm.
when we were having that conversation? Or why when you were at the coffee shop waiting for your friend, why did you default into your phone rather than waiting and having it in your pocket? And I think we see this in adults, we see this all the time now is that we don't stand in line and we don't have conversations and we don't sit without
Mhm.
our phone.
Mhm.
And so we're as a society, we're really keeping ourselves in our comfort zones and not
Mhm.
challenging ourselves, and
Mhm.
and so we're missing out on opportunities that cause a little bit of discomfort.
Mhm. So, if we can help acknowledge that they are going into their panic zone, like you say, going into their phones or escaping into their phones is one indication. I imagine part of it is having a conversation with them as well about like, hey, what was coming up emotionally, or where did you
Mm.
feel it in your body?
Yeah.
because sometimes we're not even thinking about the fact that we're freaking out about it. We just go do the thing that for kids it's their phones. Sometimes for adults it's alcohol or it's other substances. Oh, by the way, for kids sometimes it's alcohol or other substances. Just saying,
Yeah.
right? When they get
Or
into that point.
even extra physical activity, right? Over indulgence in that physical activity and,
That makes sense.
just sort of feeling those feelings and self-harm, right? It's all of
Mhm.
those things that we use to avoid feeling a certain way.
Right, right. So then how can we you gave us some ideas for ourselves of like, having that conversation about chemistry, about how can we support them. What can we do when it's something like when we recognize that they're just maybe it's not anything that makes us panic. Maybe it's not chemistry. Maybe it's not that they're dating. Maybe it's something that just isn't a thing for us as the adults, right? But we recognize that they're not in their comfort zone. They're about to get stretched, and grow. And we also see that they're maybe not tiptoeing, maybe they're careening out of control into that panic zone. What are some of the skills that we can teach them, number one, to recognize in themselves, but also to help bring themselves back from that panic zone so that they can stay in that uncomfortable space?
Yeah, I think I wanna highlight something that you said, about maybe it's not something that panics us or challenges us, and I think that's really important to acknowledge that, having an uncomfortable conversation as a teenager may not be something that we're uncomfortable with, and I think often we don't acknowledge that for kids, and we dismiss their feelings, we dismiss their anxieties, we dismiss a lot of what they're feeling because it's
Mhm,
not something that bothers me. So I don't understand why you're feeling challenged by that. And so I think that is something that's really hard for us as parents. One, not to fix their problem when it's like a no big deal for us, but
mhm,
also to minimize or dismiss their feelings because it's
mhm,
no big deal for us. Um, and have some grace for yourself to recognize that, like, "Oh, that's why that came up for me that way." Um,
mhm,
but then to acknowledge to my teen, "This isn't a hard thing for me, but I notice
mhm.
that you're avoiding it. I notice that you're struggling with this. What can I do to help you?" Right? Because remember, if it's in my comfort zone and it's in their panic zone, we can work together to pull each other into our
Into that
challenge
middle.
zone.
Mhm,
So that would be something that I really wanna encourage parents to remember, that when things feel really easy for us, it doesn't
mhm.
mean it's gonna be really easy for our teens.
For sure. Well, and I like the fact that you pointed out how easy it is for us as adults to minimize and dismiss.
Yeah.
I remember very clearly being on the receiving end of that when I was a kid, and or not even a kid, but like even into my 20s, and young adulthood. Whether it was a breakup with a boyfriend or losing my job, the things that just felt enormous to me. I can remember conversations where it was like, well, you'll be better off. And it's like, okay, but that doesn't maybe you're right. Maybe I will ultimately be better off. And yes, I did ultimately find that that was the case, but holy crap, like in the middle of it, in the midst of it,
It's really
it's a
hard.
lot. And it felt so invalidating that I think it really impacted a lot of my long-term relationship with adults in my world.
Yeah, and I also want to remember that there's always an opportunity to acknowledge what you did when you do it as an
Mhm.
adult, and that is really powerful for kids, because often when we do things that does cause harm, and it's not was not our intent,
Not at all. Yeah.
we acknowledging by just acknowledging that, it brings that relationship from being so far away so much closer, and I think that
Mhm.
that's such a powerful moment for kids to see that an adult is willing to own their their stuff and
Mhm.
to accept responsibility. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because I know that you, as we were chatting in preparation for our conversation, you were talking about asking folks for descriptions or characteristics of what they saw in a leader.
Yeah.
And so I had somebody throw that out on social media yesterday, asking that very question: What are your what values do you look for? What characteristics do you look for in a leader? And my first thought is humility. You know, being able to say, "Hey, I made a mistake. It doesn't mean you're a bad person." But
Mhm.
as a parent of a 14-year-old, if this is the first time you've had a parent of a 14-year-old, Lorraine, right? Like, not only have they never been 14 before, but you also have never been the parent of a 14-year-old before. And so, as much as it's like socially, we seem to think that you should have it all figured out by now because you've known this child for 14 years, presuming you've known them since birth, right? I know that there are certain
Yeah.
families that may be listening in that that's not the case for every person listening, but you've never had to navigate this before. So in many ways, you're learning together and you're the one with the fully formed frontal lobe.
Yeah.
So what's your take for, and I say parents, and I mean parents globally, not just biological parents, but clearly
Yeah.
also adoptive parents, step parents,
Caregivers.
parents,
Yeah.
people who fill the parental role in some aspect, even if they're not biologically or legally attached to a kid, right? How does leadership influence the parent kid or the adult kid relationship?
I think somewhere along the line, we as parents were told that we have to make decisions for our kids, and
Mhm,
somewhere along the lines, we were told that well, actually, I don't think somewhere along the lines we were told that we were leaders, and as parents, I would argue that you are probably one of the most important leaders out there,
mhm,
um, but we don't think we can make mistakes,
mhm,
and when we do make mistakes, because I want everybody to remember that perfection is not possible, and
mhm,
so that means we are gonna make mistakes,
mhm.
and it's really easy to hide my mistake. I mean, it's probably not easy, but that's my default mode, to hide my mistake, to
Absolutely,
not
'cause
acknow
who wants to be fallible?
right, but our kids need to see that mistakes are okay.
Mhm,
And when we don't acknowledge and when we hide our mistakes, we're teaching them that mistakes are not okay. And
mhm,
you're not going to grow, you're not going to learn if you're not making mistakes. It's
mhm,
just not possible. So I think as a parent who is the most important leader out there, I
mhm,
think you need to accept that you will make mistakes
mm,
and
mhm,
acknowledge, and also bring that kid along, bring that girl, boy, friend, everybody, bring them along and let them know that mistakes are okay.
mhm.
We're gonna make mistakes. I am making mistakes. And when I make mistakes, I wanna grow from them, and I'm gonna ask you what I can do better. It's great
Well,
for
and
you.
that's stepping into your challenge zone, right? Because comfort zone is, I'm not, nope, I didn't make a mistake. Nope, I'm good. That was your fault, or whatever the case may be. What, even
Yeah.
if there's not blame to be assigned. Nope, I'm fine. I was right. Oh, do I remember that one growing up? Right? Whereas like it may initially be panicky to
Yes.
acknowledge that you made a mistake or that you are fallible, right? So like let's take that as an example. If being in my comfort zone is hiding and pretending that I'm perfect and not acknowledging to the kids in my life that I made a mistake. And oh my gosh, the thought of actually saying out loud that I made a mistake just is paralyzing. Where's the challenge zone? What are some things that we can say or do that don't take us all the way to panicky, but bring us into the middle that's still uncomfortable, but opens up that opportunity for connection that you were talking about?
Yeah, I think one, I wanna tell you that every time you do something, it gets a tiny little bit easier, right? So
True.
the first time, it may be awful and really feel yucky, but the
Mhm,
next time you do, it's gonna feel a little less yucky.
mhm,
The other thing is, if taking responsibility is hard and doesn't feel like that's what I should be doing as a parent, maybe just acknowledge that the experience was yucky, right? So, wow, that didn't go well. Like, you don't have to say, "Wow, I did a terrible job," or, "Wow, messed up there." Like,
Mhm.
"Wow, that didn't feel right."
Or that didn't go exactly as planned.
Yeah, and maybe not coming out to saying that directly to your kids
Mhm.
first, but maybe,
Mhm.
like, sort of journaling about your responsibility and seeing where maybe you could have made some different choices, um, and then as you grow, start sharing those, "I wish I had made a different choice there." Right? It's not necessarily being full on acknowledgement, but it is a bridge.
Sure.
And I think your children will see the attempts, and they will help you get there, because if it's truly a relationship that you both are looking to grow, they're going to want you to do that more. And so
Mhm.
if you do that, they're going to embrace you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I remember at one point I had actually asked my mom. There was a circumstance for her that was hard, and I'll keep it vague. But I remember asking her if she would consider therapy for support for some things that she was navigating, and I almost fell off the chair that I was sitting on when she said yes,
Mm.
because I never thought, like, she was definitely one of those, like, nobody needs to know the stuff, nobody outside our family, like, we don't need to go airing our dirty laundry, nobody needs to know that we're not perfect Pollyannas. And I think that there's a certain aspect of that that still persists today. There's
100%.
definitely people, and so much of it, that's why it's so important to me, like why we're only fielding questions from our Facebook group, not LinkedIn or YouTube, because at least in our Facebook group I can tell who somebody is who's asking a question, and we can maintain a certain modicum of safety. And I recognize the irony of safety and Facebook in the same sentence. So for anybody who thinks I'm on crack, I get it, but it's at least a place where it's like a safe place where we can talk. We've got anonymous posting options, and people can ask for insight and they can ask for feedback along the way without feeling like the fear of, oh, they're going to judge me because I'm a rotten parent, or they're going to judge my kids because my kids made a boneheaded decision or something like that. And I think that's our job for the kids in our world, is to give them that space to make a mistake and not have it be the end of the world.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
awesome. Anything that you want to wrap up with in terms of finding that happy green space? I like that you identified it as green, because green is for growth, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the more we step outside of our comfort zone, it's hard. It's scary, feels uncomfortable, but the more we do it, the more we show our kids that they can do it. And that is where the most amazing experiences can happen.
Absolutely. All right. So for folks listening, as I mentioned, this is a month long, 5 week long fundraiser for the Parent Tween Foundation, and as an encouragement, excuse me, to our guests to continue sharing and providing this information throughout the month, we've actually encouraged them, or offered to them rather, that whichever guest helps us raise the most money, we will make a 20% donation of whatever they help us generate to a family focused nonprofit of their choice. And so, Lorraine, you had identified less leg, more heart. Can you tell us about that organization? I've never heard of it.
Yeah, I have to tell you, it's probably so exciting to find out about it, because the founder, Tina Hurley, created this foundation when she, uh, like, in the middle of her 30s, lost her leg due to a random disease, and she realized how hard it was to navigate life as a new amputee, and so many people are in that position. So she founded Less Leg, More Heart to help those amputees navigate the medical system, navigate the prosthetic system, to help
Mhm.
them in those first sort of new moments of being an amputee and later in their journey. But it's really an
Awesome.
incredible foundation.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I'm excited to learn about them because, like I said, I've never heard of them before. So I'm excited to learn about them. And do they support, I presume, also like kids who deal with unexpected amputations and such?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No age required. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, for folks listening, again, if you um, found nuggets through what Lorraine had to share, and no matter when you're listening, this is the fundraiser is actually going to go through June 18th, which is Father's Day here in the US. And I have to say that because we actually have speakers, Lorraine, I don't even know if you know this. We have speakers from England, we have speakers from Portugal, from Canada, from Australia, from Thailand. We've got professionals coming in from around the world. It's super awesome. And so I know we're going to have a global audience here. So
Amazing.
it is super cool. So if you're listening and you would like to make a donation in using Lorraine's link, rather, I just popped it into the chat. That should come through in all of the places that we're live streaming. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to us at Parent Tween Connection. It's Clarissa at parenttweenconnection.com. And Lorraine, thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate everything that you bring, and I love the work that you're doing, especially with teenagers and leadership.
Likewise. Thanks so much for the time, Clarissa.
Absolutely. And also, I just realized I do have these also saved for folks who would like to connect more with Lorraine and learn more about the coaching that she offers. I just popped that in as well. And that's in all of the descriptions of our events on LinkedIn and on YouTube. So you can find her if you've got questions. So thanks, Lorraine. Over and out.
Take care.